Picture this. It's 1942, and the world stands at the precipice of unprecedented destruction. In a small office at the University of California, Berkeley, a brilliant theoretical physicist sits across from military officials who are about to change the course of human history forever. His name is J. Robert Oppenheimer, and the decision he's about to make will either usher in the atomic age or leave it dormant for years to come. But what if, in that pivotal moment, Oppenheimer had said no? What if the man who would later be known as the father of the atomic bomb had refused to lead the Manhattan Project? This isn't just idle speculation. It's a journey into one of history's most consequential alternate timelines, where a single decision could have reshaped the entire 20th century and beyond. To understand the magnitude of this hypothetical refusal, we must first grasp who Oppenheimer was and why his participation was so crucial. Born into a wealthy German Jewish family in New York, Oppenheimer was a Renaissance man of science, fluent in Sanskrit, passionate about literature, and possessed of a mind that could navigate the most complex theoretical physics with elegant ease. By 1942, he had already established himself as one of America's premier physicists, with groundbreaking work in quantum mechanics and stellar collapse that would later contribute to our understanding of black holes. When General Leslie Groves approached Oppenheimer to lead the scientific efforts of the Manhattan Project, it wasn't just his scientific brilliance that made him invaluable. It was his unique ability to coordinate and inspire other brilliant minds. Oppenheimer possessed something rare: the capacity to translate complex scientific concepts for military leaders while simultaneously commanding the respect of Nobel Prize winners and emerging scientific talents alike. The Manhattan Project wasn't just about building a bomb. It was about orchestrating the largest scientific collaboration in human history up to that point. Over 130,000 workers across multiple secret facilities, consuming nearly $2 billion, roughly $28 billion in today's currency, all focused on unlocking the power of the atom. At the heart of this massive undertaking was the need for a scientific director who could navigate not just the physics, but the personalities, politics, and pressures of wartime research. But here's where our alternate history begins to unfold. Imagine Oppenheimer, perhaps influenced by his early leftist sympathies or his deep philosophical nature, recognizing the terrifying implications of atomic weapons and choosing to walk away. Perhaps he feared the precedent such weapons would set, or maybe he couldn't reconcile his love of pure science with its application for mass destruction. In our timeline, Oppenheimer famously quoted the Bhagavad Gita after witnessing the Trinity test. "Now I am become death, destroyer of worlds." But what if that philosophical weight had pressed upon him before the project even began? This refusal would have sent shockwaves through the American scientific and military establishment. The search for an alternative scientific director would have begun immediately. But here's the crucial question: could anyone else have filled Oppenheimer's unique role? The project required not just scientific expertise, but extraordinary leadership skills, security clearance, and the ability to work under immense pressure while maintaining absolute secrecy. The ripple effects of this single decision would extend far beyond the laboratories of Los Alamos. Without Oppenheimer's leadership, would the atomic bomb have been developed at all during World War II? And if not, how would the war have ended? Would the planned invasion of Japan have proceeded, potentially costing hundreds of thousands of additional lives? Would the Soviet Union have gained a crucial advantage in atomic research? Would the Cold War have unfolded differently, or perhaps not at all? Today we're going to explore this fascinating alternate timeline, examining not just the immediate consequences of Oppenheimer's hypothetical refusal, but the profound ways it might have reshaped international relations, scientific development, and the very nature of modern warfare. We'll journey through a world where the atomic age might have been delayed by years or even decades, and consider whether humanity might have found a different path through the treacherous waters of the mid-20th century. Welcome to a world where one man's conscience might have changed everything. With Oppenheimer's hypothetical refusal echoing through the corridors of power, General Leslie Groves found himself facing an unprecedented crisis. The Manhattan Project, already shrouded in the deepest secrecy, now needed a new scientific leader, and time was running out. The Germans were believed to be working on their own atomic program, and every month of delay could mean the difference between victory and catastrophe. Groves immediately turned to his list of alternative candidates, but each name presented its own complications. Arthur Compton, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist who had been instrumental in early atomic research, was already overseeing plutonium production efforts in Chicago. His plate was full, and his administrative style differed markedly from what Oppenheimer might have brought to Los Alamos. Compton was methodical and careful, qualities that served him well in research, but potentially problematic when rapid decision-making was essential. Then there was Ernest Lawrence, the brilliant inventor of the cyclotron and another Nobel laureate. Lawrence had the energy and enthusiasm that the project desperately needed, but his approach to science was fundamentally different from Oppenheimer's theoretical elegance. Lawrence was an experimentalist through and through, someone who preferred building machines to pondering the deeper implications of quantum mechanics. Could he command the respect of the theoretical physicists who would be crucial to bomb design? More importantly, could he navigate the complex personalities of scientists like Edward Teller, whose ego and ambitions required delicate handling? The most intriguing possibility was Leo Szilard, the Hungarian physicist who had actually conceived the idea of a nuclear chain reaction and had been one of the first to warn Einstein about the German atomic threat. Szilard possessed both the theoretical knowledge and the political awareness necessary for the role. However, his mercurial personality and tendency to clash with military authority made him a risky choice. Groves, who valued discipline and clear chains of command, viewed Szilard with deep suspicion. The physicist's habit of writing letters to world leaders and his outspoken political opinions made him a security nightmare. Without Oppenheimer's unifying presence, the scientific community began to fracture along predictable lines. The European refugees, scientists like Enrico Fermi, Hans Bethe, and Niels Bohr, had fled fascism and understood intimately what a German atomic bomb would mean for the world. They pushed for immediate action, regardless of who led the project. But many American-born scientists began to have second thoughts. If someone as respected as Oppenheimer had reservations about the project, perhaps they should too. The delay caused by this leadership crisis had immediate practical consequences. Site preparation at Los Alamos slowed as key decisions were postponed. The recruitment of top scientists became more difficult without a prestigious scientific director to attract talent. Most critically, the theoretical work on bomb design, the complex calculations that would determine whether the weapon would actually function, began to lag behind schedule. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, German scientists under Werner Heisenberg continued their own atomic research. While historians in our timeline have debated whether Heisenberg deliberately sabotaged the German bomb program or simply made crucial errors, in this alternate timeline, the extended American delay might have given the Germans a decisive advantage. Every week that passed without strong American leadership was a week that the Nazi atomic program could potentially advance unopposed. By late 1942, Groves made a fateful decision. Unable to find a single scientist who could replicate Oppenheimer's unique combination of skills, he chose to divide the scientific leadership among three men. Lawrence would oversee the experimental work and bomb assembly. Compton would continue managing plutonium production, and a relatively unknown physicist named J. Carson Mark would handle the theoretical calculations. This triumvirate approach seemed logical on paper, but it introduced new complications that Oppenheimer's singular leadership might have avoided. The coordination problems were immediate and severe. Lawrence and Compton, both strong personalities accustomed to running their own laboratories, clashed over resources and priorities. Mark, brilliant but lacking in administrative experience, struggled to keep the theoretical work on track while navigating the competing demands of his more senior colleagues. The seamless collaboration that Oppenheimer might have fostered was replaced by bureaucratic inefficiency and scientific territorialism. Perhaps most significantly, the moral and philosophical questions that had driven Oppenheimer away remained unaddressed. Without his intellectual gravitas and ethical sensitivity, the project proceeded with a purely technical focus. The scientists worked on solving engineering problems without the broader context that Oppenheimer might have provided. This wasn't necessarily wrong, but it meant that crucial conversations about the weapon's implications were postponed until much later, possibly too late. As 1943 dawned, the Manhattan Project found itself at a crossroads within a crossroads, struggling not just with the immense technical challenges of building an atomic weapon, but with the fundamental question of whether it could succeed without the man who had been deemed indispensable. The consequences of this leadership crisis would soon ripple far beyond the laboratories of the American West. While American scientists struggled with their fractured leadership, across the war-torn Atlantic, the German atomic program was experiencing an unexpected renaissance. The delays plaguing the Manhattan Project had created a window of opportunity that Werner Heisenberg and his colleagues were beginning to exploit with methodical precision. In our timeline, the German nuclear program suffered from poor coordination, limited resources, and crucial theoretical miscalculations. But in this alternate reality, where American progress had stalled for nearly 6 months, the psychological pressure on German scientists intensified dramatically. Reports from German intelligence suggested that the Americans were struggling with their atomic research. Information that reached Heisenberg through a network of contacts that the Allies had failed to completely sever. This intelligence proved to be a double-edged sword. While it gave the Germans hope that they might win the atomic race, it also attracted the unwanted attention of the SS and Nazi Party officials who had previously shown little interest in what they considered abstract physics. Heinrich Himmler, always eager to gain favor with Hitler through technological breakthroughs, suddenly began demanding regular progress reports from the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute. The scientists found themselves walking a dangerous tightrope between promising enough progress to secure resources while avoiding the crushing expectations that could lead to their execution if they failed. Heisenberg, faced with this new pressure, made a calculated decision that would alter the course of history. Rather than continuing with the heavy water reactor approach that had dominated German thinking, he pivoted toward a gaseous diffusion method for uranium enrichment. Ironically, the same approach that Lawrence and his American colleagues were pursuing. This decision was partly scientific and partly political. Gaseous diffusion required less exotic materials than heavy water production, which had been severely disrupted by Norwegian resistance operations. The German pivot came at a crucial moment. By spring 1943, while the American triumvirate of Lawrence, Compton, and Mark continued to struggle with coordination issues, German engineers had begun construction of a pilot gaseous diffusion facility in occupied Czechoslovakia. The location was chosen for its proximity to uranium mines and its distance from Allied bombing raids, which were becoming increasingly devastating to German industrial capacity. But the German program faced its own internal contradictions. The Nazi ideology that drove the war effort also handicapped their scientific capabilities. The exodus of Jewish scientists in the 1930s had robbed Germany of some of its most brilliant minds, including, ironically, many of the physicists who were now working against them in America. Heisenberg found himself trying to recreate theoretical work that had already been completed by refugees like Hans Bethe and Edward Teller, who were now contributing to the Allied effort despite the American leadership crisis. More problematically, the Nazi obsession with secrecy and compartmentalization meant that German scientists working on different aspects of the atomic program rarely communicated with each other. While the Americans struggled with too many competing voices, the Germans suffered from too few. Heisenberg's team in Berlin had little contact with uranium enrichment efforts in Czechoslovakia, which in turn operated independently from plutonium research being conducted in occupied Norway. The resource constraints facing Germany also began to tell. Unlike the Americans, who had allocated virtually unlimited funding to the Manhattan Project, the German atomic program competed with dozens of other wonder weapons projects for Hitler's attention and the Reich's dwindling resources. V-2 rockets, jet aircraft, and advanced submarines all seem more immediately practical than atomic weapons, which remained theoretical even as 1943 progressed. Nevertheless, by summer 1943, Heisenberg's team had achieved something that might have been impossible under normal circumstances. They had successfully demonstrated a controlled nuclear chain reaction roughly 6 months after Fermi's achievement in Chicago, but with far fewer resources. The German reactor, built in a converted brewery cellar outside Berlin, represented a triumph of theoretical physics over practical limitations. This breakthrough sent shockwaves through the Nazi leadership. Hitler, who had previously dismissed atomic research as Jewish physics, suddenly became intensely interested in the military applications. He summoned Heisenberg to a private meeting at the Wolf's Lair, his Eastern Front headquarters, where the physicist found himself in the surreal position of explaining quantum mechanics to one of history's most notorious dictators. Heisenberg's account of this meeting, which would only come to light after the war, revealed the moral complexity of his position. Unlike Oppenheimer, who had refused to participate in weapons development from the beginning, Heisenberg found himself trapped within a system that offered no possibility of conscientious objection. His choice was not between building a bomb and walking away, but between building a bomb for Nazi Germany and facing execution for sabotage. The physicist chose a middle path that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He continued the research, providing enough progress to satisfy his Nazi overseers while secretly introducing subtle delays and misdirections that he hoped would prevent the weapon's completion before Germany's inevitable defeat. It was a dangerous game, one that required him to appear enthusiastic about creating a weapon that could ensure Nazi victory while actually working to prevent that very outcome. By autumn 1943, as American scientists finally began to overcome their leadership crisis, the German atomic program had achieved a precarious momentum. They possessed the theoretical knowledge, a functioning reactor, and the desperate motivation of a regime facing existential defeat. The question was no longer whether Germany could build an atomic weapon, but whether they could build it faster than their increasingly organized American rivals. The race that Einstein had warned Roosevelt about in 1939 was finally, truly beginning, but not in the way anyone had expected.